one breaks the glass and cuts his fingers. The Rajasic person, agitated fellow, goes all out to get it, and all that he succeeds in doing is breaking the glass and cutting his fingers. But the Sattvic individual, but they whom truth and wisdom lead, can gather honey from a weed. If you are a Sattvic individual and focus on deserving it, then you're independent of the world. You have the honey within you. You can gather honey from a weed. You don't need nectar outside. So in our lives, we must dedicate ourselves to get to this third category. They whom truth and wisdom lead. And then you deserve the best. By God, you'll get it. The stock market can go up or down, the oil prices can go up or down, anything in the world can happen, but if you deserve it, you will get it. This is the meaning behind, the myths, the mythology in the Indian scriptures, where they say, if you do tapas, means hard work, you put in the effort, you deserve something. Even the gods in heaven have no choice but to grant that wish to you. Even if your intentions are evil. You've heard of the famous story of Bhasmasura? Bhasmasura was an asura, an evil fellow, who sat there and did intense tapas. He worked very, very hard. And God had no option but to appear before him and said, I'm very pleased with your tapas and I will grant you a boon. Ask for whatever you want. And evil that he is, he says, he's worked it all out in his mind. He says, whatever or whoever I place my hand on must be reduced to dust instantly. That's when his name was changed to Bhasmasura. Bhasma means ash. God had no choice but to say Tathastu. But the moment he said Tathastu, he started running, because the first person he wanted to put his hand on was God. And he went desperately to Vishnu and said, Vishnu, please help me. This fellow is after he wants to reduce me to ash. Vishnu said, don't worry, I'll handle it. And Vishnu, through his Maya, changed his form and appeared as this beautiful damsel called Mohini. And Mohini went and made an appearance before Bhasmasur, and this guy saw her and forgot all about the god that he wanted to reduce to ashes. He got captivated by this maiden, and she lured him. She started dancing, and he got more and more trapped. And then finally, when she knew she got him completely, she said, come dance with me. And she asked him to do every action that she was doing. And he got lost in that and forgot about his boon. And right at the end, Mohini, in the dance, she did this. Bhasmasur did this, and instantly he was reduced to ash. So this is what it is. If you put in hard work, you deserve it, you'll get it. Even the gods in heaven don't have a choice, they have to give it to you. But by the same token, you have one weakness, you'll be destroyed by that weakness. So with this now we'll move to verse 32.
Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashyati Arjuna sukham vayadi va dukkham sayogi paramo mataha.
O Arjuna, that yogi is said to be the best, yogi paramaha, who, seeing the self everywhere, views pleasure and pain equally. If you remember, those of you who were here yesterday, verse 29 onwards, he's giving us the test of perfection. These 4 verses are one of the most brilliant verses of the Gita. In verse 29, see, there are 3 stages. The first stage is you see others as you see yourself, meaning you're able to immediately connect with the people that you're with and put yourself in their shoes and feel for them, connect with them, identify with them, as if they were you. The moment you do that, the next step is you see equality everywhere. You show no differences between an educated person and an uneducated person, a refined person and an unrefined person, a rich man or a poor man. You're able to connect with everybody because you've gone deeper and you're able to identify with the Atman that makes the person function. And as a result of this, when you widen your perception, your identification with all, your personal pleasure or pain no longer affects you. You want to know what it is? You see, it's like this. Yesterday was full moon day, wasn't it? Yeah. At night, when you look at the full moon, it's so bright, and if it's coming streaming in through your window, the moonlight, you feel that there's a light on in the room. There's so much light. And in the morning, if you are awake at the right time, as the sun rises, the brilliance of the moon fades away until when the sun is shining fully, the moon is still there, you can't even spot it. It's like this. Once you get the feel of Atman, and once you have, when you're experiencing happiness at a much higher level, quantitatively and qualitatively, these little pleasures and pains that you have fade into insignificance. It doesn't matter. That's what he's saying here. Samabhava is something that you must aspire for. Samabhava means equality of vision. So once you see the self everywhere, then the result of that is you view pleasure and pain equally. So in verse 29, he gives the state of realization with reference to the mind. You see yourself in all beings and all beings in the self. In verse 30, it is a more slightly more intellectual, because then you are, he says, he is not lost to me, nor am I lost to him. So it's an intellectual conviction. In verse 31, he speaks of the body. You oblate all actions to Atman. And now he is talking of the effect, meaning with reference to the external world. The external world gives you pleasure and pain. You have this equality of vision, samabhava towards it. Next verse.
Arjuna uvacha yoyam yogastvaya proktaha samyena madhusudana etasyaham na pashyami chanchalatva sthitim sthiram.
Arjuna Vacha. Now Arjuna asks a question after so many verses where he's been listening intently to Krishna. Now he begins, his intellect is awakening. As we said earlier, questions have to come, they must come. The moment you start thinking and trying to apply it in your life, questions will come, and Arjuna is asking a question here. He says, O Madhusudana. Madhusudana is a name of Krishna which he acquired because he killed the demon Madhu. I do not see how this yoga of equality declared by you will continue to be stable as the mind is restless. So in verse 19, he says, just as a lamp in a windless place does not flicker, so will your mind become as steady as that. He's understood it, he's heard it, he has full faith and surrender in Krishna's message, teachings. But when he comes back to his own mind, he finds his mind is fickle. His mind is wavering. So he asks him, he says, Tvaya proktaha, as said by you, he is full of gratitude for the knowledge that Krishna has given him. But he says, I don't see how this yoga of equality of the mind will sustain because the mind is unstable. Now, when he's asking this question, it means several things. Number one, Arjuna knows the enemy's strength. In other words, he knows how powerful the mind is. You see, if you have never made an attempt to control the mind, you will not know how strong the mind is, how difficult it is. It's only when a person has attempted to control the mind that you understand it's so difficult to control. You control it here and it slips somewhere else. Try it. you try and discipline yourself and you give yourself a daily schedule to follow. Say, this time I must wake up and I must study the scriptures and then I must go and exercise or whatever it is that you want to do. You invariably will find if you stick to one, if you're able to do one thing, you slip somewhere else. So Arjuna has tried it and has understood that it is difficult. The mind is an enemy that is very, very strong. The second thing is, he knows it's strong, but he has not done it consistently. If you try it once and give it up, it's no use. When you try doing it consistently, then you understand, yes, it is a formidable task, but it's not impossible. The third is, Arjuna's mind is still restless. In fact, all this knowledge of the Gita that has been given to him is like water off a duck's back, because Krishna manages to inspire him enough to fight that battle at Kurukshetra. Then when things are all right, by then Arjuna has forgotten the whole message. He asked Krishna, Krishna, you said very fine things at the battlefield in Kurukshetra. Please repeat. Krishna says, forget it. So his mind is still restless and he doesn't really want it. You see, the difference between the Upanishadic student and Arjuna is that this whole quest for the knowledge has not come from within. It's come because of a situation. Most of us are like that. You come across some sorrow, some problem in life, only then you turn to spirituality. The Upanishadic student is not like that. Everything is going fine for him, like Buddha. He had everything that the world could offer, and yet he had this strong spiritual urge in him. So the Upanishadic student was like Buddha. Arjuna is like us. So this is why the question is coming to him. 34.
Chanchalam hi manah Krishna Pramati balavadrudam Tasyaham nigraham manye Vayoriva sudushkaram.
O Krishna, the mind is fickle, violent, powerful and unyielding. I think the mind is as difficult to control as the wind. See, look at the words that he uses. This is again typical of us. You know, you have people asking a question and the question is unending. The question itself goes on for 5 minutes, so what can you answer? People have fallen in love with their own question and they want to hear their voice all the time. So you sit back and relax, wait for them to complete. Secondly, he's asserting his opinion. I think. See, he's speaking to Krishna. He's asking Krishna a question. He must understand, first thing that you must understand when you ask a question is, if something is not quite right in your mind, it's not because what he's saying is incorrect, it's because my understanding is incorrect, deficient. So if you have the right attitude, you would ask the question in a completely different manner. But Arjuna again is like one of us. So he says, I think it's very difficult to control, egoistic. And the way Krishna deals with him, you must understand. In that, you learn a lesson. So the 4 words that he uses to describe the mind, yet what he's saying is true. So the 4 words that he uses to describe the mind are, number 1, chanchala, fickle, restless. And this is brought out so beautifully in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, where Brutus kills Julius Caesar because of his greed, because he wants power. And yet he presents it to the public, to the people who are there, as if he says, not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more, as if he's a great martyr. And the crowd is so gullible. They fall for it and they say, hail Brutus, hail Brutus. Mark Antony is sitting there furious because he knows what Brutus has done. So after Brutus finishes, he very politely goes up to Brutus and asks for permission to speak at Caesar's funeral. Brutus by then, that this nasha of the crowd has gone to his head. So he feels, oh, the crowd is all with me. He hasn't read this verse. So he's confident. He's complacent, in fact. And magnanimously he says, what can Antony do now? It's all over. He gives him permission. And the second mistake he makes is he leaves the scene and goes away. And Mark Antony, in a matter of minutes, manages to get the crowd's mind and changes it completely by the end of his famous oration, Mark Antony's oration. And throughout he keeps saying, he said, this is what Caesar did. Does this seem ambitious? And they say, no. Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. And very intelligently he changes the mind of the crowd. Within minutes, the same people who were saying, hail Brutus, are now gunning for him. So you learn from this. Fame is far more unreliable than money. So if you happen to have fame, if people say, oh, you're so good, you do this so well and that so well, don't get carried away by it. Because you never know. One moment, one person says you're bad, you're finished. Your reputation is gone. Chanchala. Second, pramathi, violent. Once an emotion gets into your system, it completely wrecks you. Again, Shakespeare brings this out in this famous play, Othello. Othello, who loved his wife Desdemona so much, and he had no doubts about their relationship at all. The villain of the piece, Iago, goes and plants one thought in him. And that's the end, that's the starting point of the whole thing. The mind is violent. So you better watch out for the kind of thoughts you entertain. Because one negative thought you entertain in your mind can end up ruining a beautiful relationship. And he himself realizes it later. But by that time it's too late. He's killed Desdemona. And he can't bear it. He can't bear what he's done with himself and with Desdemona. He ends up killing himself. Violent, balavat, powerful. And he keeps equating this to the wind. The wind is like that. Wind is restless, the wind is violent, the wind is powerful. It's subtle, but it can uproot trees. Dridham, unyielding, obstinate. Once you get caught up in a certain emotion, you don't budge from it. Stubborn, obstinate. And because of all this, he says, it is very difficult to control. And he's reached the conclusion that it's difficult to control. And then in the next verse, verse 35, Krishna answers so beautifully.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha Asamshayam Mahabhavo Mano Durnigraham Chalam Abhyasena tu Kaunteya Vairagyena cha Gruhyate.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha, the blessed Lord says, Krishna now answers his question. And see how he deals with Arjuna. He says, O Mahabaho, mighty armed one. Arjuna has said, put his question in an almost arrogant manner. So here he feeds that. He says, O Mahabaho, you great soul, mighty armed fellow. Asamshayam, without a doubt, he agrees wholeheartedly with what Arjuna is saying. Without a doubt, it is difficult to control. The mind is difficult to control and wavered. Then, almost as an aside, he says, but, O Kaunteya, son of Kunti, it can be contained with Vairagya and Abhyasa. Abhyasa and Vairagya. Abhyasa, practice. Vairagya, dispassion. So, first of all, he says, Asamshayam, first agree with what the other person has said, even if he's talking nonsense. Then you capture his attention, at least then he's listening to you. And then you put across your view. And Krishna is a master in the subject, and yet you see 100% humility, not even a trace of arrogance. And that's why he's able to get across to Arjuna. Arjuna, mind you, is a kshatriya, is a ruler, is a warrior, he's a king, prince. And so to deal with people like that, only a person who is 100% humble can get across. So, but what would we have done? Before he completes the sentence, he would have said, no, you're wrong, this is what it is. Then it puts the person off. So he says, oh Mahabaho, it tickles his vanity. It is you, and a warrior of outstanding valor and courage, you are getting scared by trying to handle the mind? That's the implication. So he says, Vairagyena Abhyasena. So first thing is Vairagya. Vairagya is, in its absolute sense, it means absence of worldly desires, indifference to the world. Niragasya bhavaha it's called. But in this context, what it means is there has to be initial abstinence. You're full of desires, yes. Your mind is powerful, yes. But at least temporarily put all this on hold while you are doing your abhyasa, while the intake of the knowledge of the Gita is going on, just as you've done. I'm sure on a Friday evening you can find better things to do than to sit here studying the Gita. But you've all done it. Why? Because those desires you've put on hold for the time being and focused on the intake of this knowledge. So you, in a way, you're already practicing it. What are you doing? Vairagyena abhyasena. Initial abstinence and abhyasa. Abhyasa is not just the intake of knowledge, it is constant, consistent application, which requires conviction, which requires determination and complete total faith in the fact that it will work. If you don't have that, then you try 1 day, 2 days, and then you give it up. So this is what it is. In the Mandukya Upanishad, in the Karika by Gaudapada, he gives a beautiful example. He says a bird whose egg has been washed away by the ocean gets angry, the bird gets angry and decides to empty the ocean. And you know how it does it? With a little leaf, dips it into the ocean and tries to empty the ocean. It's an impossible task, but yet the strength of that bird's conviction is something that you need to admire. If you have that amount of conviction, before long you'll be able to overcome all this. So you've seen drops of water falling on a rock. What is the strength of a drop of water? What is the strength of a rock? And yet those drops of water applied consistently, when they fall consistently, they make a dent in the rock. So control of the mind is difficult, yes. It's full of desires, it's uncontrolled desire, your intellect is not strong enough. But if you do this, Vairagya, initial abstinence, for the time being, put your desires on hold until you gain the strength of the intellect to deal with them. Before long, you will be successful at it. 36.
असंयतात्मना योगः दुष्प्राप इति मे मतिः वश्यात्मना तु यतता शक्यो वाप्तुमुपायतः.
I consider it difficult for the uncontrolled to gain yoga, but the self-controlled one can gain it with effort. Now if you take a look at this, he seems to be begging the question itself. He says, the uncontrolled one can't control. The self-controlled one can control. But yet, what he means is, whatever little intellect you have, whatever resources you have at your command, utilize them. Use them to their fullest. And then you'll find your capacity increases. That's how you do in everything. Whatever little money you have, invest it. It'll give its returns, you reinvest the thing, and that's how you grow into a big business. Exercise. You may not be very healthy. The first time you go and exercise for 15 minutes and your body aches for the next 5 days. But once you get used to regular exercise, your capacity increases slowly, and then you find you're able to handle quite a lot. So that's what he's saying here. I consider it difficult for the uncontrolled to gain yoga, but the self-controlled one can gain it with effort. So there are two things. Number one, the existing intellect must be used fully to control to whatever extent it can control. And the second is there must be striving. You see, each one of us must have a standard, a goal, and say, this is what I need to achieve. And then there must be consistent striving for it. The problem in the world is, if you put in a little bit of effort, you reach a certain level of competence, the world rewards you immediately. And then you get complacent. But if a person is focused on the goal, like I believe Irfan Pathan, these cricketers, the moment they come into the limelight and they play a few matches,